What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Event Masters. If I'm correct and I read that thumbnail, it's episode 26. And so this is the show where every single week we take you through a transformational journey from event prof into event master. And we do so by bringing in people from around the world who know what they're doing and want to tell you everything they know. All right, this week's no different. Let's get into it.
Welcome to the show, Event Masters. You need to listen to this if you want to throw bigger and better events. Learn how to monetize and land bigger acts. Yeah, this is where you can learn how to do that. Event Masters.
Welcome to episode 26 of Event Masters. I am your host, Dylan Schinholzer, and that's my never mind. Patrick's not here. Again, Patrick. And this is the official time where I'm going to bring up whether or not Patrick keeps his co-host status. I'm going to leave it up to you folks watching and listening, all right? If you're watching and listening, comment right now. Does Patrick get to keep his co-host status for missing another show? I'm starting to think he doesn't like me or doesn't like hanging out with me. But nonetheless, vote below. Comment below. Should we be nice enough to let him keep his co-host status? Anyways, I'm sure he's busy and I'm sure there's a reason, but I don't care. Anyways, today's episode is going to be really fun. It's going to be with a friend of mine. He's become a friend. I've hung out with him for numerous nights now, hours at a time, actually, talking about marketing funnels and everything with his community. We're going to be talking about community today and what that means and all of that and the psychology behind it and how to do it. Before we do that, though, but don't ask. You guys don't do it for some reason. I don't know how that works. But make sure you like, subscribe, and follow us on all social medias at The Real Event Masters. The real ones, all right? A couple others, and I'm starting to see, and I got to make sure that everybody knows we're the real ones. All right, so, and then with that being said, I want to also make sure that you guys are opting into our text community. If you haven't, all right, text Event Masters to 407-214-5335. Join that. I have a surprise for you. If you join that on the show, I launched something at the past pop-up event this week. And if you guys join it, I haven't sent the link out because I'm prolonging it and I've got things to do and I'm sorry. But I will get it out. Anyways. And then make sure you are opting in and joining our new LinkedIn community. That thing's going to be popping. I promise you. I got some big plans there. So with that being said, all of that's out of the way. Okay. All of that housekeeping stuff that they make you do at the beginning of a show for no reason. And now we're 2.5 minutes in and I'm still rambling before I even get to bring up Ethan. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and bring up Ethan and let him introduce himself because I'll butcher it. All right. So Ethan, my man,
Howdy.
What's up?
Nothing much. I'm glad to be here.
I'm excited to be able to reciprocate this. You've had me on like 2 of your different events and shows, and I'm like, gotta be able to get return the favor. And I'm so excited you said yes and had some time to hang out with us today.
Oh, my pleasure entirely. You know, I think it's a funny thing. I've run at this point. I've been involved in about 15 conferences in the music world that I live in, and I've been on programming committees. So I've more or less been in charge of well over 100 panels that I've run. But there is when people ask you to be involved in things, that imposter syndrome, it kicks in every time when you're like, this Ethan? Or did you, it's just that thing. But, tickle pink to be here.
Yeah, and I want to touch on it because I didn't, you said it right before the show, we hopped on here on the show, and I didn't answer it or give you any kind of response back because I actually wanted to do it on air just to do it. So you said something about it, and you just brought it up again about the imposter syndrome and coming on a show like Event Masters, you like it. I don't know, do I fit in? And I'm like, well, let me answer that now for you and also make a point to everybody here and why you are on the show and why I wanted to bring you on the show. And it between me and you, it had literally nothing to really do with your skill set or what you have accomplished in the event space. And I've said this on the show before, the skill set of an event master is only one set of it. The rest of it comes down to the mindset and the philosophies and how you approach things and how you look at it, right? The only difference between something that somebody's become a master of their craft and someone who's newer is really just time. But what they share is principles and mindset, and that is inevitably an event master. So because of that, I wanted to bring you on and extend an invite out here because of the philosophies and principles I know you adopt and have adopted so far, bringing in some of your panels that you have talked about, your events, and what you want to do inside of the community. So with that being said, my man, and for those of everybody watching, okay, I got a question, and to bring it up, and the reason I wanted to talk on it is because actually someone messaged me because of our LinkedIn group this morning. Just grew it, and just a couple people reached out, and she was like, I so want to thank you for considering me an event master. She was like, I'm new to the game. And I'm like, do you think like this, this, and this, and this? She was like, absolutely. I'm so excited to do more. I was like, all right, great. Then you're a perfect fit. Like, that's all I need, right? Like, I can teach you how to do events, but I can't teach you the mindset.
And I think it was said really well by your very first guest, if I remember correctly, Kelly in your event this week, Kelly Vaught, who basically said 80% attitude, 20% aptitude. Like, that's really what you look for in the people you work with. If they've got the right mentality, and to me, I if you can surround yourself with people that have just established themselves as lifelong learners, that's more than half the battle right there. Because I'd rather have 4 people that are looking for ways to solve things than someone that thinks that they already know how everything works. And that never ends particularly well.
Never, not at all. So with that being said, before we hop into some of the stuff that we want to chat on, because we got going a little quick, I skipped right over who the heck are you, my man? Where are you from? What you do? All of that good stuff. Let's let the people in, because I'm sure because you tend to stay behind the scenes a little bit.
I tried. Well,
you try.
Yeah, I mean,
so do I, though, by the way.
Yeah. Well,
that's working out real well.
I think that's the funny thing about trying to do stuff, and the interesting thing is, so my name's Ethan. I'm a Boston kid who grew up on a sailboat, and because of that, I got used to not having people around for long periods of time, and I've decided that my entire adult life is going to make up for that by surrounding myself with people all the time. But I work primarily in the roots music, folk music, Americana, that genre. And I spent 12 years as a touring musician with a band named Pesky J. Nixon, and had a ball where it was my face on the front of things. I was the poster boy, literally speaking. I mean, Americana, so big bearded sort of, bird in the beard kind of look, but I did that for a long period of time, and I transitioned over the last couple of years into sort of seeing all the wonderful value and pure just imagination coming out of younger artists, and realizing I had kind of lucked into my success because I was a full-time working grunt. Like, I had a full-time job. Most of my bandmates had full-time jobs, but we were able to sort of create this space for us. And what I was seeing for the younger folks is that space wasn't there. The space was sort of being cut. So I felt really, I felt like it became my mission to find space to grow this community and create opportunity within a community, because that's a challenge. The great thing about established communities is it's established and everyone loves each other and they all know each other. The bad thing about established communities is it's established and everyone knows each other, and the rigidity of the definition of who we are at that point in time makes it so you essentially create situations where you cannot invite new people in, and that's such a shame when you've got such a beautiful place.
Yeah, and so I love it. So let's fast forward to a couple things now, because or let me unpack that a little bit, because you said it a couple times in this idea of community.
Yeah.
And the community is something that on most event podcasts are not being talked about, in the sense because events are usually one-off and things like that. But I don't think event organizers put enough emphasis on understanding community and what it is and what it does and what the effectiveness of it. So I want to break down from a foundation point, and then let's get a little advanced with it. But for those listening, right, or watching this live or anything like that, what's your definition of a community? And like, when you talk about a community, really, what are you trying to define, or what are you talking about there in your own words?
So, and forgive me if I get a little esoteric on you for a second, but yeah, all good. So I certainly don't believe I invented this theory of looking at the world. I have no doubt that it's existed for a long time, but I had this moment about a year ago when I started seeing the world from a musician standpoint. You've got audience, you've got community, you've got fan, and all three of them are different groups of people. The audience are like use a football stadium as an example. You're in Wisconsin. You're at a game. There are 50,000 people. That's the audience. Those are the people watching and the people at home. The community. Those are the people with the season tickets. They're coming. They know the people next to them. They've been coming. They've brought their kids. There's a cultural reason for being involved in this experience. And then you got the fan, who's the pot-bellied dude without a T-shirt, with the favorite player painted on the stomach and the giant cheese hat. And I think, the interesting thing, speaking from a musician standpoint, is you kind of need all three, and you need to find ways to make space for all three. But to me, community is the heart of it. Like, an audience is there because you convince them there's an opportunity to be there. They have no incentive to stay. They came for a reason, and they'll leave for a reason. Community is going to be there. There's a reason. And your fans are great, but as I said before, they're a little crazy. So you got to, find the middle ground. So that when I think about community within my space, it's the people that, you think about the music festivals that have been going on for 40 years. They're the people that buy their ticket before anyone announces who's playing. It doesn't matter. That's the place that they want to be because of the experience to be with the people that they want to be with. So I think about conventions when we get back to in-person stuff, and I get to go hang out with you at a convention somewhere. Like, the reason I'm going is probably because I might get a chance to hang out with Dylan, but the reason I'll go back is I've met a group of people, and there's a reason to go back and to share what we've all done and to continue to grow sort of roots from that particular experience.
I love it. So before I get to the unpacking of that, I could tell you, me and you are not see each other at a convention, dude. We're going to some sort of festival, by the way. We're not going to no stuffy corporate hotel conference convention. Don't get me going. I'd rather hang out at like a folk festival or like a blues and jazz festival.
Well, let me stop you just briefly, because I run music conventions, and there is.
It better be fun if you're going to drag me out to it.
Here's what it is. Like, it's funny because the business side of it exists, but it is like living in a musical, because everywhere you go, everyone there, the way that we've run these things for years is the entire hotel is musicians or talent buyers. Mm-hmm. So you walk into an elevator and there's a bluegrass band playing a song in the elevator. Like, that's how it runs. So
I like it.
I'm with you. Conventions don't have to be stuffy, though.
If you can blend the two, I'm with it. But so let's unpack that, because what I heard was that there's levels to it. And I think that's very important for not only your world, not only musicianship, and we've talked about it. You kind of labeled out kind of almost a funnel, kind of that we talked about on your show and your event. But there's levels to and layers to the community of everybody, whether or not you're throwing a music event or a music festival, or you're a brand throwing an activation, or you're a convention throwing it for your user conferences. There's levels to it. And the reason that that's important, especially in how we're going to tie this into events here, people, is that no event on this planet, every single one, is either done for a community or to grow your community. And that's why they go so hand in hand, because once you understand that, and once you can understand how to reverse engineer your community, right, then you can actually start to plan an event that's for that community, right? Mm-hmm. And so just like, I want to piggyback just a little bit off of what you said of kind of this whole idea of community, just because sometimes I like to ramble, and I have a lot of thoughts on this one too. But the community at the end of the day is kind of what we're doing here with EventMASTERS, right? This whole idea of bringing together and creating an ecosystem of people that are like-minded, and that the extension of it, right? And this is where a lot of event organizers don't really think. You said, I'm going to get esoteric here, or I always butcher that word, but I don't think enough event planners think in those terms, because here's how I think about it when I'm planning an event. right?
Mm-hmm.
And breaking down community. Community is built up of a collective of people that all share that same belief, or share some sort of same belief, or likeness in
Belief,
some fashion.
value, either beliefs, values, particular passions. But yeah, there's that core, there's that nugget that holds it together. And if you take that away,
that right there is what I define as culture.
Yeah.
And that's why I was kind of excited to have this conversation with you, because I knew it would blend into and blossom into this kind of conversation. Communities are built off culture. So if you can understand community and culture, then you can actually start to create better events and reverse engineer the culture, which makes up your community. Right now we're getting a little high level here, but I think this is where we wanted to go with it, because it's super important.
Absolutely. And I think you can draw that distinction really between a shared vision, a shared purpose, and it can be really any one of them. So you we'll go back to the football team. Take a football team. They can all love each other, and that's great. They can be best friends. But if all of a sudden you take away the football game, are they all going to, like, what? If you take away the purpose for being there, that's becomes a difficulty. And that's really the challenge, I think, in creating community and trying to create that cultural aspect, where the goal really is the people experience. The goal is having that exchange of ideas in a space of like-minded people, where you're going to come out of it learning and growing and feeling cultivated as a human.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think events are really just vehicles of culture. At the end of the day, whether or not, like when I throw a music festival, that's a vehicle of my ideas and my beliefs and philosophies and how I approach events. It's just a vehicle of that. And when EventMASTERS does events, it's just it's one more vehicle for me to disseminate our message, right? When Ethan here does one more, and we're going to talk about this because this is where I want to segue, one more NERFA panel, right? That's a vehicle, right, for you guys to disseminate the message of what you're trying to build there, right? So let's segue there, because this is kind of I'm talking a lot, and this isn't even my show. But
it is your show. It literally is your show.
It is my show. Sometimes it's Patrick if he shows up. So once again, guys, for those of you watching, if you are watching, Patrick didn't come with us today. He's somewhere else. So comment below if he's allowed to keep his co-host status, or we're going to pull the badge off of his shirt. Anyways, back to it. Segue though. You have been why is community, I guess, inevitably, why has it become so important to you, and how are you focusing on community now within your own world? Yeah, that makes sense. Gosh,
yeah.
it's
so
Friday. I'm sorry.
No. I think that's a good question. My history with music, I've always been someone that like, to me, music was my version of spirituality. Growing up, I remember the first sort of folk concert I ever went to. There was a really cute girl that invited me to go to a show, and I went to the show, and I don't really remember much about the cute girl, but I remember everything about that show. And I fell in love with the way that a performer can communicate ideas and can communicate really complex thoughts, emotions. And, I'm a guy like any other. I think all of us are kind of taught, you express your emotions passive aggressively, and you don't, you sort of bottle it up. And here's someone on stage, legitimately sharing heartbreak and loss, and legitimately sharing thoughts and feelings in a way that a crowd of people sort of sat there and had. It's not even getting a crowd to agree with you. It's getting a crowd to feel what you feel. And whether they agree with you, frankly, is irrelevant. And that experience and being able to share in that kind of way, I think, is amazing. And to have a community that celebrates that method of expression is beautiful. To have people want to understand you on a fundamental level, want to understand really anyone on that kind of fundamental level, I think is pretty special. I'm not a big fan of people talk about people selling out and being phonies and all that junk. I think what people are really responding to when you hear things like that, it's a question of authenticity. Like, are you being authentic to who you are? And that to me is the heart of music. If you are authentically expressing yourself, listen, Bob Dylan did not become Bob Dylan because of his voice. I think we can all agree. That wasn't the instrument that got him to where he is. What got him to where he is was he was able to really convey very complex notions in very straightforward ways without simplifying them to the point where they had no meaning.
I dig it. So let's get a little tactical here, and then I want to end this with the idea of what I know you do really well is this concept of being a 24/7 learner and how important that is. But before we do that, we've talked about community, we've highlighted what it is, we've talked high level, but let's get into what you're actually doing now with all the different events that you are doing, whether or not it be over in the folk world and or the panels and how they all tie together. Let's actually break that down for the folks, because I think you've done a really good job and you're continuing to do it and you're consistent with it. And these are all things that are applicable to becoming an event master, even if you're just new to the whole world of events. And so let's break it down. What community are you most focused on right now? And then what are some of the ways that you are driving home that community through different vehicles, whether or not it's just events or anything, but how are you continuing to grow and build that community for yourself?
So the community that I do the most work with is, as I've said, sort of the roots music community. But when you get to sort of the base of what I do, I started a company a little while ago with a music partner who sort of since went his own way, and I went my own way, called Tribal Mischief. And the idea behind it, literally, the idea behind the name is sometimes to get a group of people to do what's best for them, what they know what's best for them. Sometimes you have to kind of trick them because we said earlier, you can get caught in routines, you can get caught in that kind of thing. And the idea behind Tribal Mischief was, it's a play on, this is slightly political. John Lewis, who's a hero of mine, one of my favorite senators and public servants of all time, he talked about good trouble, making good trouble, being able to go out into the world and do something that people didn't necessarily expect you to do, but in so doing, drive them to a better place. So that's what Tribal Mischief was about. And I looked at my wonderful community of folkies who have this wonderful notion of togetherness and inclusivity and all this fun stuff. But you look around the room and it's pretty monotone. Not a whole lot of, like, I am the pinkness that is my Scottishness is kind of dark in general for the countenance. So how do you take a community that says that diversity is one of their main sort of things they care about? They associate themselves with the civil rights movement, but you look around and to quote one of my favorite performers, aren't a lot of chips in that cookie. How do you find a way to invite more people to the table? Which I love that you ended up naming this particular thing, because I think that's what it's about. If you're creating a community, it's not just enough to create a community. You have to foster its growth and its inclusion. And if you have a community that says this is what your vision is, they need to be able to, if they're going to continue to exist, they have to actually live the values that they say are their values. So that's the focus.
Yeah. So let's
might have gotten a little offside with that.
So let's look at it from a tactical standpoint then, because I know you've been doing a lot of events and different and a lot of virtual stuff, and I know you come from love the in-person stuff as well, and I know you're trying to get back there as fast as humanly possible. But how are you using some of these events and these panels and discussions, and what are you all doing that maybe even I'm missing to continue to grow that community? So now that everybody knows it, we drove home the importance of it. What are some of the tools you're using to actually establish and foster that community or that ecosystem that you are a part of?
Well, ViewStub, of course. There are.
I'll take that answer.
I figured. But truth be told, I think the last year changed people's viewpoints about what what could be done, and even what should be done in ways of reaching out and engaging with people. So on a physical level, my primary customer as Tribal Mischief is the Northeast Regional Folk Alliance, which is a group of roughly 2,000 to 3,000 musicians from Toronto through the Maritimes in Canada down to DC. So about 3,000 musicians, about 500 to 1,000 venues. And it's just this wonderful community that has so much brilliant potential, but can't always connect all the dots. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to, they own, you talk about the emotional brain and the logical brain. Man, these folks are amazing human beings, and they live for the most part in that emotional side of the brain. What I try to do is I try to bring the logical side and say, all right, so you want to sing songs that touch people. That's great. How do you feed yourself? And have that conversation and say, yeah, money isn't evil. Money can be evil. Money can be used in truly unscrupulous ways, but you have to be able to survive if you want to keep getting your message out. So a lot of what we're currently doing is having those conversations with young artists and older artists, and saying, all right, what do you like about your career? What do you not like about your career? And where can we find the difference? There's this joke that's been told probably since I was 14, 15 years old in the folk scene, which is, how do you make $1 million in folk music? You start with 2 million. And yeah, it's funny to an extent, but it also causes rage in me now, because like I don't want that to be the case. Great artists should be recognized for being great artists. And it doesn't mean that they have to be playing the Super Bowl, but we need to find ways to do that. So on a nuts and bolts perspective, I kind of gave you the 20,000 foot view of what we're doing. On the nuts and bolts perspective, we're saying, all right, do shows. Yeah, it's COVID. You can still do shows, virtualize it, but don't just go on Facebook Live and beg your parents and your cousin and your Aunt Mel, who's half deaf and blind in one eye, to come watch you for 15 minutes. Set up a show, make people pay for it, but make it valuable enough to warrant asking people to pay for it.
Right.
And that doesn't necessarily mean that you got 3 cameras and a bunch of lights. That means convey yourself, really get the message across. There's an artist who's a dear friend who to me epitomizes that. There's a guy named Adam Ezra, runs a fantastic band based out of Boston, but travels the country. The first night of COVID, his show was canceled, and he jumped online for the first time, and 500 of his fans showed up, and he played music for about an hour. And at the end of the hour, he said, so guys, I'll come back tomorrow if you do. And he's currently on show 400 and something. He has done a show every night for over a year and change, has not missed a night. And virtually every night's 300 to 500 people live, but 10,000 plus people watch each of those shows every week. So that to me is a mechanical way. It's one of many ways that you can create connection virtually. So
the thing that I've seen you do really well, and to unpack that a little bit for the folks who don't know, what the where I was going with that is you've taken a big stance on the education, and that's how you're fostering that community, is through the education, right? The multiple panels I see you guys do, everything from contract negotiations or contracts coming out of COVID to where the ones I was on around marketing funnels and things like that. That's things that you're utilizing, right? Just as the vehicle, but he's utilizing, no matter what the platform would be, utilizing that vehicle of events and panels and weekly workshops and so on to foster the community through education, i.e. EventMASTERS, same thing we do here, right? Absolutely. But he's talking and he understands who his community is, and he understands, and because he's asked, right? Another one of those feedback loops. It's like, hey, what do you guys need most? And because he understands his industry and the community, he understands they're all creative brains. So can you, who's a little bit more logical and on the right side, is it the right side? I always get it backwards.
I
don't know. It's one of the sides of the brains that's not as creative, but more logical. That's where your brain is. So you've created a vehicle, right? I.e., these panel sessions and events that I've seen you do, and I do believe you have a folk conference coming up that I saw come out.
Yeah. Well,
so you're taking, and this is just another, and the reason I say that, and I'll let you talk on it in a second, but the reason I'm saying that is just it's one more vehicle that you're utilizing to educate your community, which the education aspect of you is what is really fostering that community. And that's what I wanted to take out, because you're utilizing events to educate and entertain. And entertain, because I won't lie, you can make a folk convention fun, and I trust you. I'll come to the next one.
Well, that's actually one of the fun things we're doing, thanks to ViewStub. This is the first time we've ever created an opportunity to be part of this as a fan. So we actually have a fan ticket where we can now sell opportunities for you to see well over 40 hours of artists playing music over 3 days. Never did that before because it was an internal thing. It was basically a talent buying and an education.
Right. So that's really interesting, because I didn't know that. Now let's unpack that then, because that's not where I wanted to go with the show, but that's a really interesting decision you made. Because so you've got this event that you've been doing for a while, which is usually just talent buyers and talent, and it's kind of their convention to come meet each other. But you've kind of taken a new stance and adapted to the new world and said, hey, wait, I could optimize this a little more. And so now you've opened up a fan. Is that virtual, or can they come in person too?
As of right now, just virtual, because the conference this year, we spent months really agonizing over whether we were going to try to do it in person or not. And what it boiled down to is we had a hotel who's been a great partner for years, but they wanted essentially a $30,000-$40,000 down payment in February.
Sweet.
And at that, February of this year, would you have been comfortable spending that amount of money for something in November?
No.
So it was one of those hard decisions. So this year it's all virtual, and the fan ticket makes all the sense in the world because of that. When it comes back to in person, we'll look at it, but we might keep the fan as a virtual option, but not an in-person option. And the reason we do that is we've got artists from Canada, and they get to come down to attend trade shows on just a travel visa. If they're coming down and it's a paid show for outside people, they have an entirely different sort of mechanism.
So you got some logistical stuff to run through there, but
stupid laws.
Stupid laws. I hate them. But I do want to make that another point here of looking at ways to innovate the current product and never resting really on your laurels. And that's, once again, right, I didn't even know that coming into this, but one of the principles of an event master is innovate, not imitate. So constantly looking at either what you're doing or what other folks are doing, and always looking to do something a little bit better, figure out how to make it better, do new things, open yourself up to new technology. You're in probably an older community, let's be honest.
Yeah,
but you're looking at tech to innovate it a little bit and add to the experience, and you're not shying away from that. And that's one big thing I want people to think about. It's just the fact that it's like, hey, I'm not shying away from it. We're going to figure it out. We're going to do something new and cool.
Absolutely. And we're also using the technology at the same point, because I've got this community that has a significant number of older community members who have stories and history that I want to capture, man. Mm-hmm. And if I don't start doing that with cameras as opposed to just storytelling around a fire, eventually that gets lost, and I don't want to lose that. So the adoption of the technology is really on all fronts. The fact of the matter is, I've been around this community for 25 plus years. I've been asked literally since I was 13 years old, well, how do we get more young people involved? And they're still asking me now. As a 41-year-old, they're still asking me, how do we get young people like you involved? I'm like, guys, I'm not the young, like my young.
We're not the young guy anymore.
Yeah, my young friends are like in their early 30s. Technically, they're not the young people.
Yeah,
they're young friends in their mid 20s. They're young adults. They're not necessarily young people. Their young friends are the young people. So I think by utilizing technology, one of the important things when you're trying to grow a community is you need to meet new people where they are. And the new people aren't necessarily in church coffee houses, and they aren't necessarily, at folk festivals in the middle of nowhere, but they are online, and they are in all of these places. And that's the goal to me is, we need to meet people where they are, and we need to give them space to take some ownership. Like if they want to be part of the community, absolutely. Let's make some space for you, and let's let you make some new space while you're here. That's a win-win.
That's right. So let's wrap this up into the last little bit I want to touch on. And so part of innovating has to come from the obsession of still learning everything, like constantly being learning, because you can't innovate and learn new things and be on the forefront of doing anything if you're not constantly learning all about all of that new stuff. And so, and I know that's a big thing for you in general, right? Of this being an avid learner about anything that you're passionate in about and getting to the next level. So I want to wrap the show up with your ideas and why that's so important to you. And because one of the other principles, once again, there's 12, and guys, there might be a book coming out around all of these principles. You don't have to write them down. That's why I don't write them down. But anyway, it's not a plug at all. But what I was saying there was being an avid learner and always learning is part of growing. And I think that's a big thing. So I want to hear your takeaways, your perspectives on being an avid learner, why it's been so important. Has it been something that you evolved into, or were you always like this? How'd that work for you?
I was really lucky. I had two wonderful parents who instilled sort of that sense of, you have to learn. You just have to learn. Like it's not. You don't get to a point where you're like, all right, I'm done, because that just makes for boring people. And you and I were talking a little bit before the show, and I really enjoyed your event this week. I particularly enjoyed both Will Current and Kelly Vaught, Kelly who sort of kicked off the event. One of the things Kelly said that resonated with me is, what he looks for in bringing someone onto his team is 80% attitude and 20% aptitude. If you get the right person and you get someone who wants to learn and is open to that learning experience and is a joy to work with, I don't care if they don't know Notion, which is the base tool I use to organize things. I can teach them that. At the end of the day, I can't make a jerk that knows my systems well not a jerk. I can take a wonderful human being who doesn't know my systems, someone who knows my systems. So that's, I think that's sort of the key culture of learning, and part of that attitude is openness to it.
Yeah, no, I like it. I mean, because it's a big thing for event planners and event profs and true event masters is one who just never stops learning, right? And I learned this through the last event, right? I was dealing with Barry Cates, Will Kern's done well in his life, and Kelly Vaught's done well, Mark Billick's been well. Yep. And every time I do this often is when I talk to people of that level, you start to realize it's like, hey man, I look up to you, man. I want to be where you're at. And he's like, yeah, well, I want to be where this guy's at. Yeah. And for me to get where that guy's at, I'm sitting here like, hey, I want to have clients like Nike and Adidas and Netflix. And he's like, well, I want to have clients like this, this, and this. And the only way I get there is if I continue to evolve. And it's a perspective shift of like, we're learning to get to a certain level, and people we look up to are still learning. Yeah. Even if we look up to them, they're still learning to get to their next level, because it's like you said, it's an evolving game. Well, but I think event people struggle because they're too freaking busy working half the time. Like, you guys just need to chill sometimes.
That's part of it. But I think the other part of it is I think it's just human nature to assume that the person that you perceive to be more successful than you must be happy or must feel like they belong there. Like, I haven't met a human being that doesn't have imposter syndrome. Like, I know songwriters who've written over 500 published songs that have been in major motion pictures who are still struggling and struggling with feelings of self-worth, struggling with, commercial, all of that stuff. So the notion that I think it really boils down to feeling good about what you're doing because you're feeling good about what you're doing, not because you're trying to chase, this title, this whatever. And to me, that's what learning is about. Like, I'm happy to chase learning. Learning is a fun thing to chase because you get little wins every day.
That is 100% true. And those little wins stack up and they make you feel good. And if you learn new things, you can adopt new things. And if you do new things in the event world, you can start to, get new attendees or new sponsors or just new everything if you're always innovating and learning, right, and being open-minded. So I think that's a really good place to. What you got?
Oh, I was going to say, and I give you credit on that, because when I started, when you and I met, sort of looking into other software a while ago, but when we started talking, and I really looked into View Stub, and sort of my brain exploded with opportunity. I started with a very focused, well, this is my world right now. That's what I'm looking at, and that's all I'm going to really work in. Right. And I started that work, and all of a sudden other opportunities started presenting themselves. So one of the things that tickles me a little pink is not only am I running the Northeast Regional Folk Alliance in November, but my entire team on Tribal Mischief was asked to run Far West, which is the West Coast. So we're running San Diego through Alberta, this giant region, in the conference they're doing in October. A financial company has reached out to them to help with identity branding and all that stuff. And it all comes down to sort of these conversations like this that we're having, where you just get excited. And that's, I think, it resonates with me, but I think it resonates with any human being.
Yeah. Just you're always just kind of learning from people and being open to meeting new people like we were. We just met through a random Facebook group. And then now transition all the way to here, right? Relationships evolve, and it just really takes that open-mindedness to want to talk to somebody, figure out what they do, how you can help, and just be open to learning from them and things like that. So I think that's a major piece of advice for all event people watching this. It's just, and that's what this group is in the community, and why, if you're watching this over in LinkedIn or Facebook or wherever it is, like, that's what the communities are for. I don't want them to be just me posting all the time. Like, that's boring. I talk to myself, right? I want it to be everyone who's connecting and collaborating with each other and being open to learning from one another, right? I will never have all the answers, but the idea of a community allows me to have those answers, right? Because we can, right? So I think that's another big thing for a community. So Ethan, one last thing to wrap it up, whatever you got for us. Got one idea, tip, strategy. So, I can't think of any more words because it's Friday. So one last thing for the people before we hop off here.
Sure. I believe that the overall goal in doing any kind of presentation is your goal is to elevate the environment in which what you're doing exists, whether that be virtual or whether that be in person. But if you can find a way to really create a space that is welcoming, a space that fosters that sense of passion, I think that, to me, is the heart of what makes a great event and a great community. And I'm thankful when we met, I felt a kindred soul, and that the two of us were talking about technology, and you were getting as jazzed as I was, being like, wait a minute, no, we can use it for this. Oh, no, we can do this. Oh my, and that is that. No, it's a blessing to be able to meet people that sort of spark with you that way. So. Thank you.
Well, look, people, LinkedIn community, Facebook community, wherever else this is streaming, where we got it, YouTube. We don't have a lot of views on YouTube. I need some help. But LinkedIn groups and everything, if you want to connect and collaborate and create relationships with Ethan here, we'll drop all the comments. He's in all of our groups, so you'll see him anyways. Make sure you connect with them, create relationships. That's what this whole thing's about. So once again, Ethan, I can't thank you enough, my man. This was fun.
Thank you.
Fun. And excited to see you in the community and getting involved and all of that. Major success, and I hope major success for your events coming up. And of course, let not only you can ask me questions, but the community is at your disposal, my man. So anything we can do to help, post it away. Let us see if we can solve some problems, because we all know everyone faces problems. Good Lord. So
great. Yeah.
If we can help, we can help.
Sounds great.
All right.
Thank you.
Cool. Well, Kelsey, take us out, my friend. Do the whole thing right here. Yep, that thing right there. While I. Yep. Mm-hmm.